Hi, welcome to Seven Lamps Ministries. I'm so excited to share with you one of our many testimonies that God has given us. The one that I want to share with you today is about how God provided for us to get married and go on our honeymoon. So I'm going to start back in 2014. It actually started in July. And my fiance at the time, we had decided to pray and fast for 3 days on water only, and to seek God's face about when He wanted us to set the date for our wedding. So we prayed and we fasted, and we were waiting for God's instruction. So this is something that we have learned over time together, that unless God instructs, you don't do anything. You just wait and don't act on your own wisdom. So on the Monday, I had actually watched a testimony by David Gates, and I had sent it to my fiance. And during the testimony, there was a part where he spoke about how God's people do not wait until they have everything in their hands. They listen to the instruction of God's voice, and then they act on that. So they are in complete obedience, and it's a step of faith. So when I had heard that, I knew immediately God was saying to me, Tania, now is the time for you to get married, for the two of you to set your date. But I said to God, Lord, I want to obey you, but I know that this needs to be said to both of us. And because the man is usually the initiator, I need my fiance to be the one who initiates on this. So I had sent him the testimony. And while I was at work that night, because of the time difference, I got a text message from my fiance saying, it's time for us to get married. And it was the exact same words that God had spoken to me. And my husband, my fiance, had said to me, God's people don't wait till they have everything in their hands. So it was very amazing to see that God had used the same line, the same quote, to speak to both of us. So we had said to God, okay, we are happy to obey you, but we don't have anything. I was still in England, Mark was still in America, and we were actually in the process of sorting out his immigration status. And we thought, how will this happen? How will we afford to live? How will we afford a wedding? How can we set a date? But God was very insistent on it and said, set your date. So we prayed and asked God, okay, when? And we have felt inspired that the date should be the 31st of August 2014. So that was on the Monday, and God had said, start making your plans, start telling people. So that's exactly what we did. By the Thursday, Mark's immigration papers were authorized. So we were just in so much awe. My fiance, or my husband now at the time, he had been waiting a very, very long time. I'm talking years to get this sorted. So this was an incredible miracle for us, because all we were doing was listening to God's instruction, and this was an open door for us. So now we had the go ahead, and we knew that things could work out, and we had God's seal of approval. But now we had the mountain or the molehill, whichever you want to see it as, of organizing the wedding and paying for the wedding. Because of his immigration status at the time, he wasn't able to work. So I was in England trying to work, and funds were limited, but the faithfulness of God carried us through the whole way. So what we did was we started to make plans, and we started to organize with our church. And as we started making plans, we just started seeing how God was providing for us in every way. I had different people come up to me just randomly at work, people that I worked with, friends, family, just offering to give me money. They gave me checks, they gave me money. And this was incredible, because the time of year that I needed to fly over, I was hoping to get there by the beginning of August. But the time of year was very, very expensive to fly. And I looked at the flights, and I felt, oh wow, these flights are so expensive. They were £800-900, even going up to £1,000. And I was saying to God, how will we afford to pay for my flight and to pay for a wedding? I'd managed to get a wedding dress that God had provided, and that's another testimony that we'll share with you on another day. But I was looking at these flights and I was thinking how every day that we wait, it goes more and more expensive. But God had instructed me at the time, wait to a specific day. There was a Friday, and I was quite perplexed, but I decided, okay, I will obey. And I told my fiancé, my husband, that this is what God had told me. And in the meantime, I had been looking at flights online, just keeping an eye on them, what time of day I would like to fly, which airline was offering the best deal. And by the Wednesday, it was on a particular Wednesday, I saw a flight and I saw that the price with one of the airlines had dropped it was around in the 700s. And although that is expensive, it's still much cheaper than the flights that I had seen. And so I was so excited, and I was like, oh, maybe I need to book it now. Maybe I just need to book it, because at that point, because of the donations I had received, I had some money, and I had been saving up money for my own visa. And I told my fiancé, and he said to me, what did God tell you? And I said, no, to wait till that Friday. So he said, just obey God. And I said, okay. So what I did, I had my iPad, and I really felt impressed that God had said to me, don't close that page. Keep it open, and on Friday, just open it up again. So I didn't close it. I left it, and I closed the other pages. And I just prepared myself, knowing that I was going to be, God willing, booking my ticket on the Friday. Friday came, and I had some errands to run in the morning because I wanted to get ready for Sabbath. And I was staying with a friend because I'd moved out, because I was ready to just go as soon as God said to go. Bearing in mind at this point, the flights and my journey there had been delayed and delayed and delayed. And at this point, it was about 2 weeks before the wedding. So I was like, oh, okay, let's see what God does. So when I got back to my friend's house, I realized, wow, the time has flown by. There's only half an hour before Sabbath comes in. I need to buy this ticket before Sabbath draws in. And I got to her house and the internet wasn't working. And my heart sank. I was like, oh no, what's happened? So I prayed and I managed to get some internet working again. And I looked at the flights and I was like, oh no, the flights have gone up. They're really expensive again. What am I going to do? And then I was like, oh Lord, please help me to find a good flight. And then I remember God saying to me, remember the page that I told you to keep open. I was like, oh yeah. And so I went onto the page, but of course I had to refresh the page. And I was very aware that if I refreshed the page, the flight might go up. And as I refreshed it, the flight had actually gone down ever so slightly. And I was so excited. I literally just looked for the dates, looked at some timings, and just pressed buy. And that is how I got my flight. And that was on the Friday, and I was to fly, I think it was on the Monday. And I flew on the Monday, but in the process of going to the airport, I obviously had to take extra luggage with me, and I knew that I had to pay. And when I weighed the luggage, it was a little bit overweight, but the fees were very expensive. But again, because God had provided, and I had managed to save some money for a visa, which I was going to obtain later on, I had exactly the right amount of money to pay for the fees. This in itself is a miracle and a blessing from God, because I would not have normally had that money. They charged me about $700 just for my fees. My heart sank. I was like, oh wow. But I thank God that the money was there, because it would not have been there otherwise. So God is God is a strategist. He sees everything that we're going to need. It's not a surprise to him, as sometimes it is a surprise to us, but it's not to him. So once again, God had provided. I got on the flight, and if I could recall correctly, I think I had 3 seats to myself. So I rested and I slept. So I got good rest on that flight. That meant I arrived the week before the wedding. We had so much to do. But again, all the money that we had used was gone. So we had to just pray and just trust God. And the goodness of God was immense. Everyone was volunteering to help. The ladies in our church cooked the food. A friend of ours made all our beautiful vegan cupcakes and cakes. We had an incredible sweetie table. We didn't get charged for anything for the wedding. And people would say to us, well, what's your budget? What's your budget? And we would laugh and say, well, we don't have a budget. And they would look and be confused and say, because you have so much, or because, and we would say, because we don't have anything, but our Father in heaven owns everything. So we are just trusting on his budget for us. So as we were preparing, we knew that we didn't have a honeymoon, and we couldn't afford a honeymoon. We didn't have somewhere to live at the time after we would get married. Once again, when I had come over, I had all my old jewelry, and God had inspired us to sell all my old jewelry, which I don't wear, which was enough money to buy tickets to go on honeymoon. And someone gave us their timeshare, so we didn't have to pay for our honeymoon again. And then on the night before the wedding, we still didn't have somewhere to stay for that night. And my husband had looked in his email, and we had seen that his family had bought us a week in a hotel. So God blessed us with 2 weeks of honeymoon. We had nothing, and he gave us 2 weeks, a week in a hotel, and then a week in Florida for our honeymoon. And then while we were there, all the money that we had received as gifts on our wedding day, God had allowed us to use on our honeymoon. And it lasted much longer than we had ever thought. We came back and we were able to live off that money until my husband was given a job. So I just want to encourage you today that God is faithful. God sees our needs before we even know them. He wants to know your wants. He wants to know the desires of your heart. Trust in him. Seek him on everything. Don't just act. Don't just make a decision because it seems right to you or to the people around you. We had lots of voices saying many things to us, but we decided to wait on God, and we decided to listen to his voice. And even when it didn't make sense, we stepped out in faith, and God rewarded us, and he blessed us beyond anything that we could have imagined. So I want to praise and thank God today, and I want to encourage you to be obedient to his voice and to step out in faith and see what he can do for you when you allow him that room and that access in your life. Thank you for listening. God bless you.